Hello there. This is the first of the Purple Summers lectures. I'm Caroline Stevens of the Basis Project, and today I'm interviewing Jon Wedger, his next Metropolitan Police detective. Hello, Jon.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So, for the benefit of the audience, some may not have heard your name before and don't know about your background. Could you tell them a little bit about yourself, your background, how you came into the police force, and we can perhaps touch on the Tommy Robinson case, which is very current at the moment.
Right. Well, in respect to myself, I'm a retired police detective, recently retired. I served just short of my 30 years stint. I specialised in child abuse and vice investigations, and my sort of reason really for talking to yourself was the status I attained in being a whistleblower, and I blew the whistle on deliberate child abuse and child prostitution cover-ups by the upper echelons of the Metropolitan Police.
Wow, and that is so topical because with the Tommy Robinson case up in, it was Leeds, wasn't it? And he was trying to expose the grooming gangs, but you've obviously had lots of experience in policing that side of things in the metropolitan area.
What I've done now is that I was bullied into silence, and this was over 10 years ago because I exposed the sheer extent of child prostitution in London. And these are all kids from the care system, and they're being worked as prostitutes from the ages of 9 up till 14. All of them were given Class A drugs, crack cocaine and heroin, and they were just taken to a variety of clients all over London and used as prostitutes. Now, it was covered up. I was threatened. I was threatened in a very vile and aggressive way.
Right, can I just go back a little bit? So if these children came into the care system, so they had presumably been abused at home?
Not that I'm aware. I mean,
Right.
some of them, I mean, there's a reason why they were in care.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a deeper argument. Sometimes care can be a safer place for them.
Sure.
Not all the time. And again, you've got this word care, and sometimes it's anything other than care.
Yeah.
The majority of the people that I do a lot now with victims and survivors of abuse, and people that are recovering from alcoholism and drug addiction as a result of childhood trauma, a lot of them that went into the care system suffered appallingly. And you know, you're seeing a lot of cases now that are going through the courts where the system has deliberately failed them and ignored them. Now, as a police officer, I thought I would have some sort of stand-in when I exposed this, but I was threatened into silence and bullied into silence. But in the end, I did dig my heels in and speak out.
So you were. How were you getting involved in the care system? Were you in part of a unit that specialised in?
Yeah, I was on a specialist unit at the time, and it was dealing with vice. So it was dealing with prostitution issues in London.
Right. Okay. So you were travelling the streets in your car, and you were questioning people who were.
No, we were part of our duties was to deal with street prostitutes. Now,
Right.
Again, the street prostitutes that we dealt with, all of them were on heroin. Every single one of them, and every single one had come from the care system. But every now and then you would find children that were involved. It never really got looked into properly, but one little girl did come forward.
How old?
She was 14.
Right.
She came forward on 2 separate occasions and it had been ignored. Well, say ignored, it just didn't go anywhere. On the 3rd occasion, I was asked to look into it, and I sort of really made an effort with this girl, and she wasn't lying, and it wasn't just her, there was many others. And then each girl then told me about another kid, and then there was boys involved as well, and it was just huge. And then when I...
And where were these children living?
They were in various placements, under foster care or in children's homes. But, you know...
So the system was letting them down by... The foster parents were letting them down?
They were just allowed to do what they want, and they were preyed on.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I mean, some of these kids can be a handful, and they can be a bit nightmarish, you know, because they've come from traumatic backgrounds, you know,
Yeah.
and they're street savvy as well. They're smart, they're surviving, you know, and you know, they're not pleasant, some of them. And I'm not attacking them because
No.
I did everything I could to help them. And these kids have been ignored.
Probably most of their
problem,
lives, probably.
Well, the problem has been ignored for decades. And I'd had documentary evidence that kids had come to notice from being involved in prostitution for at least 15 years. And I believe that it was going back further than that. Now,
so what years are we talking about when this was?
So it really, the stuff I picked up on was sort of the beginning of the 2000s onwards. But then, what happened with me? I was threatened. I've now got a civil case ongoing, so I've got to be very mindful of what I'm saying. But it was by a senior officer, and I was threatened that if ever I mentioned a word of what I'd found, I would lose my home, my children, and my job.
So this is I suppose, a salutary lesson for people who want to become whistleblowers. They're always very mindful of what they can lose themselves.
You suffer.
Yeah.
You suffer, and that is one thing I will say to anyone who's thinking about standing up, especially in an institution like the police.
Yeah.
They're going to come for you. Now, this is what I'm doing now. I'm going and I'm bringing together a variety of whistleblowers. Majority of them police whistleblowers. I'm only concentrating on those that have exposed child prostitution cover-ups, and there's so many of them that have been threatened in an identical way as myself, and some even more severe, right? And this seems to be a well worked out, age-old practice, and I've sort of defined
throughout the nation.
Throughout the nation, I've defined it as the algorithm of bullying. You know, I've got now in my group, I've got officers from Greater Manchester Police, from the West Midlands Police, from Hampshire, the states of Jersey.
Are they all anonymous at the moment?
No, there's some that are quite well known. You know,
Yeah.
There's one that's Maggie Oliver, who's been on Big Brother, and she's done a lot of national TV. One of them's Lenny Harper, who bravely stood up and exposed not just the child abuse, but also the child murder in Haute de la Garenne Kids Home in Jersey.
Ah, right, yeah. I've heard that.
Now, what we're looking at is that now I sort of travel the country and I visit various places where whistleblowers have sort of operated, and I've been to Rotherham, and I'm now part of the group as Jane Senior, who's the social worker that exposed. See, in Manchester we had the three girls that Maggie Oliver brought to the attention, and the BBC actually made a drama of it. When you look at Rotherham, you go to Rotherham, it's a small town, an old industrial town, old steel town in the northwest sort of
Yorkshire.
cluster. Yeah, it's a northeast sort of cluster of sort of South Yorkshire. It's not a big town at all. And it started off, 1,400 children came to notice. Now they're probably looking at 2,000 children that were pimped out, were prostituted.
Over a time span of, how many years was that?
I think that was going back to pretty similar to what I was looking at from the early 2000s onwards, you know?
Yeah.
And now we're even seeing police officers were involved in the sex with children and social workers. And we struggle as police officers. We think we would have a bit of backing and our forces, our respective forces would be behind us. But the opposite has occurred. And now, when you've got saying about Tommy Robinson is exposing mainly the Muslim grooming gangs, now these have occurred not just in the north, you know, Bradford, Leeds, Newcastle, Rotherham, Rochdale, we could go on and on. You've got Luton, you've got Aylesbury, you've got Oxford, you know, these. Now, one of the things I've been highlighting is that if this has gone on in these provincial towns, we have not heard of one case of organised child prostitution in London.
Why is that then?
Well, exactly. You look at London. London's one of the biggest urban conurbations in Western Europe. It's got a population just shy of 10 million.
Wow.
Right? The national crime statistics were that 75 to 80% of all organised crime in the UK occurs in and around London. Child prostitution is organised crime.
And how young are these children?
Again, the ones I can only talk about what I know about, but 9 to 14. But I mean, I spoke to victims that were passed around even younger, even into the infancy ages. You know, and the question needs to be asked: why have we never heard about this? Why have we never heard? And there is this massive veil that comes across us all when we start exposing this horrendous organised criminality. Now, Tommy Robinson, they've done their best to silence him. He's a member of the public that's taken it on himself to go out and expose this. He's struggling. We struggled as police officers as well. Now, I'm trying to get the law changed because police officers are not subject to employment law. They can virtually do what they want, and they do what they want with us. It used to be classed as a disciplined service. They say it's not military, but it was all the instructors when I joined had come out of the army. We used to do marching. The guards used to come and teach us marching, and so it had its bedrock in that military style discipline. You will do as you're told,
Yeah.
and that's that. And they keep an eye on everything you do, and it's heavily compartmentalised. And specialist units take governance for specialist crimes. So the managers in charge of these specialist units, like the one I was on, they're a filter. They will determine what comes in and what goes out. And if there's something that may be politically sensitive, or it may have some detriment to the moral well-being or the financial well-being of the UK, then they will do their best to limit what the public know.
And they're going to dissuade you from. Are they going to dissuade you from reporting?
Well, what they will do, they will tell you not to, and if you continue to do it, they will attack you and they will bully you. Now, they tried to imprison me on numerous occasions.
So you were getting arrested?
Well, I never got arrested, but a number of files went to the CPS. There were charges against me. I was being investigated for nearly 3 years for 9 different offences.
Right.
And
Did your MP help you at all?
My MP, bizarrely enough, used to be the former Cabinet Minister for Policing and Crime. Now, when he got involved with me, all of a sudden he was removed from post, almost overnight. He has actually come forward and gone on BBC Radio and said that there has been a cover-up by the Home Office involving Jon Wedger and his whistleblowing.
Really?
They took my paperwork at the Home Office. They promised an independent investigation of my claims because there was question about the Metropolitan Police's failure to investigate it properly, and then the IPCC's failure to investigate it properly. And even when complaints went into the IPCC, they never even gave me any debrief at the end of it. And that's contrary to all the rules regarding the Victims' Codes of Practice, as they call it. I was meant to get an update every 28 days. I never got one update in 3 years.
No.
So the Home Office got involved. I went to a recorded meeting with members of the Cabinet. The Home Office were there. They took my paperwork. They promised to investigate it. I never saw or heard from anyone again. And then they even denied knowing me. And they said this to the former Cabinet Minister, and he held them to task. And he actually did take it above their head. He took it to the Home Secretary.
So before this happened to you, did you manage to get any of the paperwork through to protect any of these children before they caught up with you, if you like?
Well, look, the paperwork the police owned anyway. It's their paperwork, and it was only stuff I had that I was entitled to, which I passed on to the Home Office. And then the Home Office, God knows what they've done with it. But what I will say is that when I was bullied and told, you will never ever look at this again, I was told, you've got no idea who or what you are dealing with. You must shut your effing mouth, right? They were the words that were said to me. And they said, you will lose your home, your children and your job if you continue. So there was no ambiguity about this. And went on to say, you will be thrown to the wolves. I knew I was up against it. And my parting words were, to a very high-ranked officer, you will never look at another case of child prostitution again. Now, I was approached by someone that was high up in that department, many years later, getting off 7 years later.
Is that in the police, you mean?
In the police, yeah. 7 years later, and the woman come up to me, she put her arms around me, burst into tears and said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I knew what they did to you. I should have intervened and I didn't. And she said they never investigated another case again. And the only time they started looking into it when the Savile expose occurred, then they started looking into cases. So the children aren't getting protected.
Would you say that's happening still today?
Oh, definitely, 100%. The only time they actually change is when they're embarrassed and shamed into changing. They have failed to protect children. The Metropolitan Police has failed to protect society's most vulnerable. Now, where are we? How is that a gauge of a civilised and decent society if really what is the essence of whatever is beautiful, and that is the children, are let down in such a horrendous and deliberate way?
Well, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it?
Well, of course it does.
Their children, and so it goes
Caroline,
on.
how is this story going to end? I mean, now what I'm looking at is, because, like I said earlier on, that I work a lot now with the victims and survivors of abuse, which are in the 40s, the 50s and the 60s.
Mental health?
And exactly, they're still carrying these demons. Mental health, alcoholism, drug addiction. 90% of heroin addicts you can attribute back to trauma in childhood. Our prisons, the majority of them have come from traumatic childhood backgrounds. You know, and we are setting people up to fail. We are picking up the pieces and we are ignoring the root cause of this. And it's child abuse.
Yeah.
And it is a no-brainer. I've been talking to someone who does a lot of work on the forensic psychology side for the Home Office, and said 90% of the people I deal with have come from traumatic backgrounds. I've got to go and speak in the northeast of England, in Newcastle, to mental health professionals, and they're saying exactly the same. We can attribute so much of what we're dealing with to child abuse backgrounds.
So, I mean, we've got this increase in the mental health problems, not just with social media and all the pressures that kids have today anyway, which isn't what we used to have. Plus, you've got, you know, this burgeoning side of children going through the care system and set up to fail, then producing children of their own. They will fail.
Well, this is what happens. I mean, if a child is not brought up in a balanced and caring environment, it's going to suffer, you know. And then you've got children having children, and we're not helping. There's no protection, and the other thing is that there's no spiritual protection either for them. You know, they're lost and they've got no
they feel
guidance, unloved, everything.
Yeah,
And we're missing that essence. And when you look at native communities, how they treat their children and how they nurture them and they set them up to succeed, we do the opposite. And what you can't forget as well is the money that is made out of dysfunctionality. And shame on those that make a good living out of other people's misfortune deliberately, you know.
I mean, how much does a foster parent get for taking in children?
Now, I'm going to tell you now, I brought up 4 children on my own. My older 2 children weren't my children, right? And I don't mean that in a cold way. I love them all the same.
Yeah.
Anyone who loves and cares for a child that is not their blood as much as they would their own, they get my heart in an instant, right? I think that is the biggest gauge of humanity that you can have. And they say that the mark of a decent society is how it treats its prisoners and its animals. They forget to say about children. But it's all about the love and the compassion. And I never got a penny off society because I didn't warrant it, according to them. Okay, it's not about the money. And when you look at the children's homes that I was dealing with, right, and bear in mind, going back to what I was saying about not one case in London, the London Borough of Haringey has got more children's homes for the square mileage than anywhere else in the UK. It's got 26 kids' homes, right? These places are money-making machines. There is money to be made in dysfunctionality. Back then, one child, they would charge local authority £2,000 per week per child. So they had on average 5 kids, right? So that was 10 grand a week in their pocket. And when I spoke to the majority of these children's homes, right, and I said, how many kids you got? They said about 5. How many of them at the weekend do you lose, right, to crime? And in crime, I mean prostitution, right? And they were so candid about it. They went, we lose at least 3.
3 out
Three.
of 5.
Yeah.
Every weekend.
Yeah, every weekend from a Thursday, usually coming back on a Monday. And some of they had their register, their occurrence book, and so some of the workers, the in-house workers, said, look, we've even got the registrations of the cars that pick them up. And I found links to local brothels with these, links to organised crime with these. Never been looked at. Yet I'd been given assurances by one of my sergeants that an officer had been dealing with this for the last 2 years. And they said, we've not had one copper by the missing persons people look at this.
So basically, the way society's run these days, say if your parents had your child going out on a night, you'd say, you're not going to go out in that, are you? Or what are you going to do? And I'll pick you up. And all that does not happen.
Well, how can it happen? Because these aren't their parents.
No.
And also what happens, these girls then, and boys, I don't know this out, but the majority were girls, but there were boys that were being worked as well.
Yeah.
They are encouraged then to coerce their friends into the system. So they may have a friend who's at home, and I know of occasions when they were saying, tell the social workers that your mum's doing this to you and doing that to you, and their friends would get put in care, and then they could, once they're in care, no one can touch them. They can do what they want. The social workers can't restrain them, can't grab them. And then they
I've heard of cases, sorry to interrupt, I've heard of cases where children have gone into school being upset. The teacher said to them, why are you upset? The child will say, oh, I'm having a terrible time. Could say anything, as you say. And then the next thing they've known is the parents go down to school, the social worker's called, social worker goes and meets the child, and has conversations with the child without parental presence and suggest that the child perhaps should go to the police. And then once they get reported to the police, have you heard of this?
Well, I mean, not as such. I mean, what I looked at, I used to work on a multi-agency basis and referrals were made, and there were kids that would get their friends to make allegations up so they could get put in care so they can then start working with them as prostitutes and making good money. It did occur. It was rare, but it did occur. When it came to children making up allegations on a serious level, official allegations of abuse that were false, I think in all the hundreds I dealt with, there was only one that was proved to be false, and that was an acrimonious relationship that broke down. And because one of the things they say is kids are liars. It is so negligible, it's not even worth considering. Kids don't lie about these things. They don't lie about the abuse that they've been through. And the other thing that they say now is that people are coming forward because of money. There's victims have come up to me, they are now grown adults, who said, the last thing I want is compensation. If I get money, you might as well give me a loaded gun, because they're alcoholics or they're drug addicts. And they said, we're not doing it for the money. You think we had to go through all this? And when you meet the victims, there's so many damaged people, damaged souls, and physically damaged for years and years of abuse. So shame on anyone who thinks that this is a money-making exercise. It isn't. This is serious organised criminality. I know of one case, one girl was saying that she was charged, taken to a big posh restaurant in the Mayfair area of London, where all the top, the Hilton Hotel and all this, just around the corner from them. And it was an Arab restaurant, after hours, and the pimp who dropped off was getting £2,000 for this girl.
That's serious.
Yeah,
big
money. Big money. It's massive money. So
they take them. So they basically pick them up from the children's homes or the foster carers. Take them to meet clients.
Yeah. Well, you've got grooming, and grooming works
through social media.
Well, no. I mean, I'll work pre-social media. I mean, a lot of it's done now via that. And
so, could it be worse now? Could there be an explosion of grooming?
I would have thought so with mobile phones and everything else. Yeah, I would have thought so. And the teachers are saying, they're finding a lot more pornography, homemade pornography with the kids.
Isn't it?
And that, but these were men that were deliberately tasked to go. We called them Romeos, to chat these girls up. And one thing is lacking in their life is love. Now, the worst thing you can do to a human being, and they've proved this, even when people are tortured, if they're in general population, they will tend to get through it. One of the things that kills a prisoner bigger than anything else is solitary, right? We're communal beings, right? And that destroys someone. So any attention, whether it's positive or negative, is still attention.
Yeah.
And so the argument you used to get is, well, if they've been abused by this person, why'd they go back? Well, because they do, because they're getting attention. Even if it's abusive, you know, you go back, you survive in the environment you're in. And however you do that, that's a choice for you. But the main goal is you survive. And if there is misdemeanors with it, then so be it, you know. And these fellas, they know that these girls need looking after. And there was women that were grooming as well. And they'll give them attention, look after them, you're beautiful, do their hair for them, take them out. But their goal is to chat them up, get them to fall in love. You're talking about young teenage girls that are, you know, very hormonal as well, and that need to be loved. And all of a sudden they got a boyfriend, and he said, but he loves me. And they don't understand, you know, they're emotionally immature. And then, of course, the goal is to pimp them out.
And they may not have had any love from their home.
Well,
and
exactly,
then been pulled away from that.
you know. And it had been going, and it's massive. So coming back to what you're saying about Tommy Robinson, what he's doing is he's highlighting to the population, this is going on, and this is going on unchecked, you know. And it's something that us whistleblowers have been screaming for a long time.
But you can't do that in the police force.
Well, we can't. You know, they silence you. And what they did with me is I wanted to leave. So they wouldn't let me leave. They kept serving me with gross misconduct papers, which meant I was getting investigated, so therefore I couldn't resign. And all that time I was couldn't resign. They then stopped paying me, so I couldn't resign. I couldn't get another job. I had no income, you know, and I was looking at a criminal conviction and going to prison.
That must have been a really stressful time.
And I had children at home, yeah. Oh, and
how did you manage to cope financially?
Well, luckily there was good people that fundraised and dropped some money off, but I lived with nothing. And, you know, at the same time, one of my children last year, because I'm only recently out of it, he was so badly injured, he was in hospital on life support for many months, and he died twice in hospital. And I had to stay by his side for many nights. And I came home one day, and one of my colleagues who was so concerned at what had gone on, went to a senior officer and said, please help John, he's done nothing wrong. And the police's response, when I came back, I spent 3 days with my son because he'd died for 7 minutes, and they thought he was brain dead. Didn't think he'd wake up. He did wake up. And when I came home, police were waiting for me. 2 detectives had been sent by the Metropolitan Police to my home county where I lived, come round to investigate me for child neglect, because they said I left my 16-year-old boy home alone.
We're talking about children being abused. You've been abused.
Well, I'd say it's torture. I mean,
well, I think the children probably say that as well.
It's quite funny because when I spoke, I thought I was on my own with this. I thought there was no way anyone would have gone through what I've gone through, and there's no way any force would be so stupid as to have covered this up.
Yeah.
Well, lo and behold, I was wrong. And how wrong could I have been? Because now the whistleblowers are just hemorrhaging, and it's all the same. And there was one, Lenny Harper, who was a senior officer, so he was a high-ranked detective, and it exposed horrendous abuse at kids' home in Jersey, Haute de la Garenne. And he said, they'll come for you. They're going to come for you now. And he said that the tentacles of this will go right to the heart of the establishment. He said, they're going to have you arrested. And then Maggie Oliver, who exposed the Rochdale child grooming and prostitution, almost identical investigation. Exactly the same thing. You know, she was served with gross misconduct. She was facing prison. She even had to go home and tell her children she could be going to prison. Exactly the same. Now, there is no way this is coincidental. These chief constables, now I'm going to say there is an exception there.
Well, we've got Mike Veal.
We've got Mike Veal. And Mike Veal is a friend, and as part of the whistleblowing...
Operation Conifer, was it?
Conifer, yeah. He's now moved. He's now gone off to, I think it's Cleveland Police, but...
Would you like to tell everybody about the Mike Veal
Yeah,
case?
Mike Veal, a chief constable. Now, what a revelation, a chief constable standing up against organised establishment sanctioned child abuse that went all the way to the heart of the establishment, which was predicted by Lenny Harper, and that was Ted Heath. And he also then, part of that was also that Ted Heath was involved in Satanism. So there was a satanic ritual abuse element to this as well. And they really went for Mike Veal, and I've had quite a few, you know, sort of close conversations with Mike, and he just said the detriment to the family. And I said, I know, I feel the same.
Well, I think actually, I'd just like to thank Mike Veal.
Yeah,
if
without
he's
a doubt.
ever watching this show.
God bless him.
Yes, because there's so many people in the audience that thank him from the bottom of their heart, because what he did was truly impressive.
Yeah.
He has children, and, you know, he's no longer in Wiltshire Police. He's moved on, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's
now,
gone to Cleveland. He's gone to the North East.
Yeah. That was incredible.
But again, it's turned his life upside down, which, you know, and I can never forgive them for what they've done to me.
No.
And neither can Maggie and all the others. And there is an organised crime element to this. There's one whistleblower. He knew that there were very, very connected gangsters were linked to recruiting children and had links to hierarchy in the police. You know, and that can't be ruled out. You know, and there was even evidence is now sort of coming out that you know, the Cray twins, the secret of their success were that they were pimps, you know. So it'd been going on for a long, long time, and it really has. I mean, it is...
So do you feel as if we're making any headway?
Massively, unbelievably so. And
in what respect?
Well, it comes down to this thing, right, that public servants have a duty. Now, police officers have a duty to act without fear or without favour. Now, they're failing in their duty. They are failing in their duty because, for me, there is nothing worse than the abuse of children.
No.
Now, you know, there's so many crimes. You know, the biggest library in the world is a library of law. You know, millions and millions of laws over absolutely everything. And when it comes to criminal law, you know, if you say to a police officer, what's the worst thing? They'll say it's murder. Well, it isn't. A murderer will go to prison and he'll get through it. You know, a thief, a burglar will go to prison, will get through it. A paedophile, or what they call a nonce, they go to prison, they're going to get a hard time. Because the majority of people in that prison are there because of them. They say it's they're there because of the police, they're not. They're there because of paedophiles. And paedophiles, they're the biggest secret society there is. These are very, very connected people. These are very, very deviant people. And when you profile a paedophile, they're very patient people as well. They tend not to have previous convictions. When you get criminals, they go through, you know, the University of Crime. You know, they'll start off with the juvenile
Low
prisons
scale.
and they'll go up and they'll move up to more serious crime
Yeah.
when it comes to dishonesty, you know. So from just petty shoplifting right the way through to armed robbery. With paedophiles, they tend not to have any convictions for sexual offences. If anything, they'll have convictions for deception because it's a very deceptive mind and they have very devious minds.
So they won't have had a caution necessarily.
Well, they may well have, but
it
on the
won't be
whole,
shown on the records.
on the whole, what we've got to look at is a generalisation.
Yeah.
On the whole, they will go under the radar
Right.
for many, many years. So, you know...
They'll be viewing pornography, perhaps, will
well, who knows what they'll be doing,
Yeah.
but, you know, and the one thing with paedophilia, you know, well, there's two things with it. It ain't contagious, and it's not curable either, you know? So you're not going to catch paedophilia. You know, and if you're a victim of it, there's no, you know, you're not going to go on to be one, although there are cases of it happening. But also that, you know, they found it's not curable. It's, you know, it's in them, and that's that. And it's not economic, so it doesn't rely on social boundaries. And it doesn't rely on geographical boundaries. You know, these people are from every swathe of society.
So from the rich to the poor.
Right the way down. But what I will say, as much as it has unified them, and it has done, and it has had influence on how judges treat cases, and we've seen that. It has had influence on the way police officers fail to investigate cases. It has had influence on the way police attack their whistleblowers, right? And also the victims, how they get denigrated and attacked. It's had huge influence on that.
And what do you mean by huge influence?
Well, a negative influence.
Because of...
Well, I mean, I'm not, when someone's abused,
Yeah.
right, only two people know about it. The victim and the abuser.
Yeah.
Right? But that doesn't need to say that it never went on.
Yeah.
Historic child abuse cases have a 2% success rate, going on the burden of proof that as officers we have to attain, which is beyond all reasonable doubt. Right?
I think this is a really important aspect, isn't it? The fact that the burden of proof is such a high level, isn't it?
It's incredibly high. But without sounding conceited, I had an 80% success rate on that 2%. If you want gold, you dig, you know. But you can get it. You've got to be dogged and you've got to be determined, and the truth will out. It will always out. And the process, any victim out there will agree that anyone who has had to go through that court process, it's harrowing, it's horrific, and it's demeaning. But the truth is the truth. You can't contradict the truth, and you can't. But unfortunately, a lot of your victims, they are discreditable people. They've got a lot of convictions on the whole. You know, not all of them. I'm just going on a generalisation. There'll be a lot of people going, no, I've not. But there's a lot of them will, and especially if they're turning to alcohol and drugs, there's going to be a lot of shoplifting, and there may be violence and things like that. So the system will instantly attack them for that. You know,
right.
You know, but.
So they'll discredit their credit, their
of course,
character,
because the law allows that, and it was even greatly endorsed when it comes to the inception of the Bad Character Act in 2003, which made it even more difficult for someone with a criminal history to be seen as telling the truth. Right.
So the opposing side can blacken your name,
and they will. You know, you've always got to look at an inner. And they will use it. They will use any tools that's available to do that, because that's their job. But when you do succeed, you've really overcome adversity, you know?
It's very tough, isn't it, for the victims? Because to be abused for years and years, you can understand why they would want to take themselves out of it.
Well, when it comes back to what I was saying about paedophiles being the ultimate secret society,
yeah.
These are connected people.
Yeah.
And there will be, you know, you've got to look at why. Why are certain judges giving horrendously lenient sentences to sex offenders consistently?
Yeah.
Why are certain officers, whistleblowing officers that are trying to expose this, attacked in the way that we are attacked? Why?
Yeah.
You know? And there's got to be something very nefarious behind it. I was talking to a solicitor who's representing the government in this independent child abuse panel, the ICSA panel, and he turned around to me and said, well, you know, maybe you've embarrassed the Metropolitan Police in exposing a failing.
Sure.
And I said, okay, let's look at that. I said, you're a solicitor. Your job is sometimes not too dissimilar to mine, right? You know, we go out for the facts and then we go and prove a case. And I said, if you found that your senior partners have been overlooking an administrative error which has allowed a lot of your cases to fail in the court system, and you knew there was a remedy, an easy remedy, and you brought it to their attention to implement this remedy, firstly, they would probably praise you for diligence. And if there was any negativity, maybe it's because of what you said that you've exposed a failing, but tomorrow will be day one and you can move forward and win a lot of cases and then make a lot of money and get a lot of success. I said, but what if your boss turned around to you and then swore at you, sacked you, tried to get you arrested and threatened to have your children taken off you? Do you not think that would be massively over the top with nefarious undertones? He went, yeah. I said, well, don't talk to me like I'm a conspiracy theorist then, because I'm not. You know, this is what you're up against. But again, what happens in these private little conversations or wherever it might go on, we're never going to be privy to. But that's not saying it doesn't go on. But on the other hand, it's bringing us together. It is bringing all us whistleblowers together. I've just met with a brave woman called Jane Senior. She's a whistleblower, a social worker who exposed the Rotherham scandal, you know, the 2,000 children.
Yeah.
She's gone on to write a book and get an MBE out of it. But in her process, she suffered. They tried to get her husband sacked from his work.
Her husband?
Oh, yeah, and it was all linked in with the people she was looking at had connections with her husband's management, and it's
Oh, right. Okay.
again and this is sorry I'm doing my own, but this is what they'll do. They'll use any sort of tool they can to bring you down.
Would they have tried, I mean, like with you, they tried to take your children from you.
Yeah.
Did she have any children? I mean, has that happened to other people? They try to attack you
Well,
personally?
one of them, which draws a bit of a parallel to what happened to Tommy Robinson, is he got arrested for mortgage fraud.
Yeah.
Right, and he's claiming that this is a
Yeah.
spiteful tactic. Now, one of my whistleblowers, he was in the police force in Hampshire, and he exposed a big child abuse and child vice ring on the Isle of Wight and southern Hampshire. And he was bullied, he was threatened, and one of the things they did him for mortgage fraud. Because what he said is that police officers tend to hyperinflate their earnings so they can live in a nice area. Because as a cop, if you live in a bad area, you're going to get a lot of problems.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a police officer going to prison, they're going to get a grief, you know.
Yeah.
So they looked at his mortgage application. It's got nothing to do with his work or anything, and it's exactly what they did to him. And he stood a Crown Court trial and was found not guilty. But
Well, that's interesting because a friend of mine used to work for an accountancy firm. I know it's slightly different, but the principle's the same. When they wanted rid of somebody, they would actually go through all the records. They would concoct.
oh, they would. I mean, data protection's the main one for police officers because you have access to a lot of data.
Yeah.
And how you use that data, that's a matter for your judgment. Now, an investigating officer might have a different opinion and say he's violated this. But they went through, bear in mind, I'd made criminal allegations of corruption against senior officers for deliberately covering up child prostitution over many, many years and the attack and bullying on myself. That never got looked into. Very scantly, but me as a victim
Yep.
and an informant and a witness to all these horrendous crimes, they looked through all my emails going back years and years and years. And I'll give you an example of one of the things. There's a friend of mine had left the police and moved to France, and he was an undercover officer for many years, and his main role was he'd dress up as a tramp, and he would just live on the streets as a homeless thing, you know. And he got in touch with me, went in to meet up, said, let's go for a beer.
You mean he was doing that whilst working for the police?
That was his role as a police.
Okay.
He was an undercover officer.
Right.
Living as a tramp, he was an infiltrator, he'd live, you know, and very good. Anyway, and one of the things that he said, oh, we're going to have a beer, and I said, well, come along, we'll have a drink of methadone, which is, you know, what a lot of, you know, heroin addicts would drink. And years ago, I'd sent him that as a joke, you know, and then they then wanted me to stand trial for conspiring to supply Class A drugs.
Wow.
Yep. You know.
So they were watching you.
Oh, they went
like
through
a hawk.
everything, and I'd done nothing wrong. But you know, going back to what I was saying, to act without fear or without favour. Now, I like to think I did that, and these officers say, "Oh, we're frightened." Well, where is the real fear? In you standing up and protecting children, or in that poor child that's in that kid's home in the middle of the night and the predator's coming from them? That's where the real fear is. You know, grow up.
What about these people who run the children's homes, who allow the kids to...
Well, their hands are tied. You know, again, it's a financial arrangement. You know, and there may be some...
Do they have a duty of care?
Well, they do, but then maybe they fulfil that duty of care. They write in the occurrence book, what more can they do? You know, again, this is what they would argue it. I couldn't do it because I would feel compassion and love for fellow human beings. And one of the things that they attack you with when you're dealing with children, and it's not just police officers, this will be social workers and nurses and anyone like that, you're getting too close. You're taking, you know, your emotions home with you. And I argued this with someone once, and I said, you know, I watched a programme about a zookeeper at London Zoo, and he dealt with elephants. And this man was obsessed with elephants. And he was the head keeper for the elephants. And I said, you know, that man, what would he talk about in the pub after work? He'd talk about elephants. If he went to a dinner party, he'd talk about elephants. He'd probably be known as the Elephant Man, you know. He'd probably even got elephant wallpaper in his house because he's got compassion and love for his job. We're dealing with children, you know. Anyone who doesn't take that well home, they're subhuman. They're robotic. They shouldn't be in post.
So have you seen any of the children on your travels
Well,
since?
when I did the walk to Manchester recently, I walked from London to Manchester to raise awareness from whistleblowers. One of the victims, our victims, was going to do the walk with me. I'm in regular contact with a lot of the victims that I've dealt with, you know, through social media and things like that. And I do speak with them. Some of them are adults now, you know, they've grown up and everything else. But yeah, you know, and they've gone on, you know, again, with the right time and love. That's all you need, time and love. And it solves everything.
I know you've been meeting some MPs. It was quite shocking. Since I last saw you, I found out that in 2016, it was reckoned that 164 MPs were on the sex offenders register.
Unbelievable.
Can you believe that?
Unbelievable. But it wouldn't put it past me. I mean, the MPs that have come forward, they are victimised for coming forward and helping us. They are. And one of them was even told, your political career will go no further. And that's because he was helping us. And that was mainly to do with his help of Mike Veal. You know, now the system is set up to fail, and it has. Now, I if I can, I just want to give you a little graphical representation of. Just want to check my mic here. Now,
I guess this is, you used to do this a lot in court, did you?
Well, no, I mean, the best way to put a point across is, how do you dream? You dream in images, you know, you don't dream in numbers and letters and all, you dream in images. So any way to get the point across, it's always best to do it in pictorial form, you know, always. Now, if we take what we're here for, and that is to protect children. Now, you've got a little child, right? And I'll stick with a girl only because the majority of... And this little girl, she's going to be subject to a care order, right? She's in trouble, and this little girl is being used, sexually exploited, is what we say now, pimped. And, you know, using this term trafficking, and it always comes up sorts of kids being brought from sub-Saharan Africa over to here and all that. Trafficking is a movement for the purpose of crime of a person from point A to point B. So if I take a kid from a children's home and take them to a brothel, I've trafficked them.
That's that's interesting, because I had always conjured people coming into the country.
Yeah, you know, and it's, I think we got to, because then you distance it from it, it's happening. What we got to look at is happening on our doorsteps, and we are ignoring it.
Yeah.
We deliberately, whether it's cognitive dissonance or whatever it is. One victim said to me, do you find that your world is getting very, very small now? I went and explained myself. He went, well, who can you talk to about this? I went, that's true. He said, everyone, can we not talk about this, please? So, and they won't invite you anywhere because you're going to go on about it. A bit like the zookeeper with the elephants, you know, it's because it's your passion.
Yeah.
I couldn't sleep at night. This was so wrong.
I know.
And the sense of injustice was just overbearing. It was just horrendous that we allow this to happen to our children. Absolutely appalling. But this little kid, she needs help. Now, the people that are appointed to help are the police, right? It's a police's job to help this kid, because this kid's involved in crime and she's a victim. No matter what she does, whether she takes drugs or whether she's working as a prostitute, she is a victim. If she's a juvenile, she is a victim, right? So, and she should be treated as a victim as well. So if it's prostitution...
But she doesn't have to be doing crime, does she?
Well, she will be involved in crime because she'll be working as a prostitute.
Right, okay.
She'll be taking drugs, which is a crime. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But our job is not to go out there and prosecute and demonise her, because she's a victim, you know?
Yeah.
We can explain her actions, you know?
But I guess in years gone by, did you always class them as victims?
They did, yeah, they did. However, when you look at cases that have gone from the court, they've been attacking them. And I think you've got this in the Rochdale. One of the girls was treated as a suspect, you know, and this is what goes on, you see. So now, if she's involved in prostitution, then that should be the remit of the vice unit, okay?
Okay.
Now, Manchester definitely had a vice unit. I think Liverpool may well have had. London had a vice unit, a dedicated vice unit. And it was their job, under the set legislation, to protect that child, right? So they should go out there and they should find that kid and they should take her into a place of safety, right? And the Children's Act is there to grant police emergency powers to get that kid and to take her into a place of safety, and then the social services will then go to court and get a further order, right? It's emergency protection order. So they should go and pick up that little girl. Now, I'm going to explain what happened when I did that once. I picked up a little girl from the streets of King's Cross in London, a well-known red light area, a historic red light area.
How old was she?
About 14. She was on Class A drugs. She was a very small girl and very underfed because she was on heroin and crack cocaine. And she was out working as a prostitute. She might have been younger, actually. Anyway, took her into police protective custody, which was called a PPO. And I was told never to do it again because the girl had scabies. And as I'd taken her into protective custody, put her in the car would need to be cleaned. And I was told, if you ever pick her up again, tell her to F off. So that was their way of dealing with kids, right? Instead of debriefing her, finding out what's going on, getting her in a secure unit because she's on drugs, she need medication, she need to be cleaned up.
Gosh.
That's what. But you see, the vice unit then would say, well, it's nothing to do with us, because what they say is that girl is subject to a care order, right? That's child protection's job. Now, when you think of officers dealing with children, you think of child protection units, right? Child abuse investigation teams. Now, the police love an acronym, so I respect them, but they either go under child protection units, they used to be, or now they're called CATE, child abuse investigation teams. They keep changing these acronyms. Now, really, they're right in as much as that girl is subject to a care order, and therefore this unit has got the governance for her as well.
Yeah.
But they'll say, well, no, because we deal with familial issues, intrafamilial issues, right? So it's what is going on within the family. Now, the social services, when they take out protection orders, that extends the family. They also then have the powers of attorney over the child. You know, so there's things like residence orders and everything else, which allow foster carers or social workers to make decisions that ordinarily a parent would make. Okay.
So they're basically saying the parents aren't capable.
Yeah,
of doing that.
Well, what's saying is that these people should also be dealing with this kid as well.
Yeah.
Right? They should be. But again, they choose not to because they said no vice. But this girl, while she's on the street, she's an absconder. She's absconded from her placement. So the police also have this other unit, which is called the Missing Persons Unit, MISPER. Right? They should be looking for this kid because she's gone missing.
Do they?
Right? No. They should be debriefing this kid to find out what she's involved in, what criminality. She's a source of information. She's a witness. She's a victim. She's an informant. She should be treated as such. Don't happen. They know that this kid will come back Monday morning and that's it.
I won't say anything.
No, and it'll carry on again. Of course she won't say anything because this is what's happening. But again, it's justifiable for everyone to row out of the problem and no one to row in. And do you know what? None of these units back then would talk with each other. They would get invited. These people would invite them to meetings. They would invite them to meetings. None of them would turn up. One social worker said to me about a young girl. This girl had cysts inside her vagina due to infection from unprotected sex. She was very young. It was a life-threatening disease and she was in real trouble. And she said, this girl's going to die. We keep inviting the police to these meetings to explain it. They've not turned up. And said, in fact, for the last 10 years, we've been inviting the vice unit to meetings. They've never turned up once.
Do we know why? I mean, in the days of modern technology, where you can email and copy everybody in, this shouldn't be happening.
Well, it shouldn't be happening in a decent society.
No.
You know, what I draw a parallel with was when a woman was caught throwing a cat in a wheelie bin a few years ago. It was caught on camera. A woman,
right.
threw this cat in a bin, and the UK was up in arms.
That's
you
right.
know, we've got charities which have got so much money, like the donkeys charity. I was told that there's so much money that they've got. They've been importing donkeys from Morocco just to keep the charity going. You know, the Cats Protection League. All these, they've got so much money. Anything to do with kids, no one wants to know. No one wants to put their name to it. It's toxic, and it's if you see what happens, to anyone who stands up for children, they get attacked.
Yeah.
And they get attacked from central government. Now,
And you've got to ask the question, why?
Why? I know, the big question.
Why government?
I was invited by a woman who had a kids charity, a very successful kids charity for many years. Her name is Camilla Batman-Gelage. She had kids company.
She had the big coloured outfits.
Yeah, big woman.
Larger than life person.
And she had governance for 40,000 children throughout the UK, Manchester, Bristol, everywhere.
Really?
Yeah.
So where were they? Were they living in children's homes?
They were still in, I think, local authority placements, but she catered for them. She would feed them. She had therapy sessions for them. She was all to do with therapy, very sort of mumsy and caring.
Was she sort of effectively bringing them together in a way?
Well, she was helping them, you know.
Yeah.
And one of the things that she said to me one day, she said, "I'd like you to see something." And it was kids that had been involved in really traumatic sexual abuse. And part of the therapy was art therapy. And she had a gallery that had been set up, and the kids were instructed to draw what they saw at the moment they were abused, the real most terrifying moment, again coming back to the fear.
Yeah.
Some of these coppers need to see what these kids go through, and I think it will wake them up a little bit, you know. And these kids drew the most horrific pictures, but what was really weird and unifying with it all, they all drew like either devils or lizards or snakes, and the eyes all looked like a snake's eyes. And they were saying, well, why'd they do it? That is what they see. And you think they're looking into the eyes of pure evil. And that's what they're doing. And I spoke to a paedophile once, and I said to him, you know, because, again, it's not my job to judge them. I will commit every minute of my living day to targeting anyone who hurts a child.
And as we say, these paedophiles could come from any walk of society.
But to torture, beat
any
them
ethnic...
up, or do whatever, it's not going to achieve anything, because at the end of the day, that paedophile is a source of information as well. He will be part of a collective, a ring.
Yeah.
You need that information, you know. Will
they shop at others?
Yeah, they will do. Yeah, anyone will. You know, anyone will.
If they can get off.
Of course, and please know it.
Reduced term.
Yeah, and they do, You know, they do, and it happens a lot. And I turned around to him and said, "Why do you do it? What is it?" And he said, "It gives me energy. When I rape a child, it gives me energy. It charges me up. You know, and it's preying on that energy of that child. You know, and you see later on in life the emptiness in their eyes, what these people have done. Child abuse. I'm in a fact-finding mission at the moment. I'm going to meet up with, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, professionals, and their game is the psychology, the treatment, and the forensic psychology of victims of abuse, right? And I want to know how much is attributed due to the adults that they're dealing with to childhood trauma, and what I've been given as a ballpark is about 90%. So this is just the rot in society. This really is just attacking the essence of everything we have, and it's being ignored, deliberately ignored, and it has to change, you know. And anyone who is going out their way to expose it, God bless them. I mean, I know we were saying about Tommy Robinson, he's in prison. Unfortunately, I wouldn't adopt the methods he has, because you can only go with the tools you've got, and if a court says this is contemptible, then you've got to you've got to abide by it, because you know your enemy's got teeth and it will hurt you. And I've been told by a barrister to be careful of the contempt laws. And also these courts, they're not secret courts, they're closed courts, and they're closed courts under the Children's Act, and part of the reason is to protect the child.
Yeah.
And not to have a public gallery and have reporting restrictions whilst it's ongoing. So that has to be respected. And it can come across, and I know I do a lot of work with the alternative media and things like that, and there are these sweeping statements, all police are Masons and all social workers steal children. It's untrue, and it's not right to go down them lines, and the courts are secret courts. That may happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but what I'm saying is there's also a legitimate reason for that, and a benevolent reason for it as well. And that has to be, got to be balanced about this as well, you know. I've been treated appallingly, but not half as bad as the victims of abuse have been treated.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to plod bash, and I'm not here to attack social workers either. You know, they're good people that are doing good jobs, and we need them. But what we can't have is cover-ups of child abuse. We can't allow it. And if you look at what happened in Belgium, in the case of Marc Dutroux, now anyone who's watching this, I would implore them to look up on YouTube. It's Dutroux. It's how you spell it, Dutrous. And I think someone said no, it's Dutroux, whatever. But anyway, first name of Mark, and this was a paedophile that was abducting children, and he was keeping them imprisoned, and he was taking them for sex parties. And
how old were these children?
I think these were teenage girls, young teenage girls, and I think it was about 7. I think 4 of them died, 3 of them survived, and they were taking to parties, and there were very wealthy people. There was rumours there was a Belgian royal family involved. There was high-ranking officers from the police involved, and all sorts.
I mean, presumably that's happening here with all the high-ranking people.
But again, what we got to look at is that we can look at Belgium as a society that's not too dissimilar to ours.
Right.
You know, if we start looking at the far reaches of the earth, and we start looking at places where African countries, sub-Saharan African, you know, we're predominantly different colour to us, different religion to us, different. You can distance yourself. Look at a Christian country that's near to home with a very similar demographics to us, which is Belgium, which is Brussels. And when you look at these kids came forward, they did the same. There was reporting restrictions. They threatened the police officer that was investigating it. The magistrate was threatened. And 90 civilian witnesses died in the lead up to the trial. Right, the girls were only allowed to talk about their abductor abusing them and no one else. So they put as many restrictions as they can, but it was so big, it hemorrhaged. And it was only that the fire service, there was some connection with one of the girls in the fire service, found out about the cover-up. They went with the fire engines and blew the parliamentary windows out, and then the farmers sprayed manure on the building, their version of the House of Commons, and then 500,000 people in a small country like Belgium took to the streets the next day and demanded that this got... And it changed it. But, I mean, we have seen it leak out with our politicians being named, and we've seen it with our celebrities being named, you know, and the cracks are starting to appear.
Well, surely, I mean, it's going to take the people to take to the streets, to leaflet, to get this message out, because this disease, if you like, is everywhere. It's endemic in Parliament, in judiciary, and partly in the police force as well.
What I say to those that are put in places to dam this, right, to build a bridge, to stop it getting out, the gatekeepers to this, these chief constables, I'd say to them, be careful of what you're doing here, because this is your future and this is going to out. There is no way you're going to stop this. This is coming out one way or another. This will come out. You either be part of the cover-up today, but tomorrow you could be in a world of trouble over this. Now, if you take, say, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, right, whoever it might have been or is now, when they leave, they are a commodity for the City of London. They can get a job in the City of London in the commercial enterprise, and that company that takes them on can sell their shares at an inflated rate because they've got head of compliance is ex-commissioner of the Metropolitan Police or whatever it is. They get a peership out of it as well. You know, would a company really want to take someone on, and the shareholders really want someone who's covered up paedophilia?
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to invest in that. But if someone who's got the backbone to expose it, well, then they're a good person to trust. They've got good judgment. And I would say to all these chief constables, if they ever do listen to this, is that be careful who you're threatening, be careful what you're covering up, because this isn't going away.
Well, I think there's a lot of tension in the streets at the moment because of the Brexit situation. People are realising that they're being lied to on a big scale. Are we going to get Brexit and all this pantomime and charade? And, you know, this is just an extra exposure of lying and covering
of course.
up.
I mean, if you go back to Bill Maloney turns around and said that child abuse has always influenced global politics. Now, if you take like the European Union, Ted Heath brought, the UK into it, and this is a man that's been alleged not just as a child abuser, but a Satanist and a child murderer. Why should his judgment be looked at when, we're even adhered to when this man has been potentially would have killed children? Who are these people?
Well, they're held in high esteem. So how can they be in places where they're judging others for doing similar crimes?
Well, I mean, I won't name names, but I mean, there's one senior politician who would abuse young boys and dress up as a woman, and a lot of people will know who this is, and got very, very high position in government, and his name would crop up consistently. And his family are trying to clear his name. Well, why are they trying to clear his name? The man was a paedophile. His name was always coming up. Now, when you're in the police, and it'd be the same in the military, if you get in a job where you have to deal with very sensitive, top secret information, you need to be vetted. Now, I went for a job and I got this job, and I will be dealing with sensitive, top secret information. It's graded. There's a grading system. And I had to write down everything intimate about myself, right? And I was told that if you're involved in swinging, you need to tell us, because we will be searching all your social media and your emails will be looked at. If you've got numerous sexual partners, that will be looked at. I had to write down all my sexual partners, who they were. I had to write down all my financial transactions, who I banked with. My partner at the time I was engaged to, they had to check out her family who were abroad, but from Eastern Europe, so they had to go and get the all clear from that force that there was no misdemeanors with them, and they really went into everything. And what was said to me by one of the sergeants was that one of the things that will go against you, they'll never admit to it, but it will, is if you're homosexual. Right. And even in today's political correctness, because they're aware that on the whole have got more of a promiscuous lifestyle and will be open to bribery and coercion more than someone that's in a stable heterosexual relationship. And it was a woman sergeant, it was a lesbian, told me that. She said, I'd never go for them jobs because they wouldn't give it to me because of my sexual persuasion. Now, when you look at this MP that I'm inferring about, it was an open secret this man was a homosexual. Yet he was given one of the highest positions in the land in respect to the political environment.
Is he still an MP?
No, the man's dead. But why the hell was that allowed when they knew that this man could be a risk, embarrassment?
Yeah.
And why is it allowed?
Is it a case of they can blackmail?
Blackmail value, and that's what it is. Now,
that's the whip system in Parliament. I mean, that just seems, it's just a blackmail system.
It is a blackmail value.
How can that be fair? So we've got this system in Parliament, they're supposed to be governing us. They now class themselves as Parliament being sovereign, yet they have this inherently corrupt system. I mean, I've been, in politics for the last 5 years, and politics tends to attract a lot of people who want the power, who have the ego. So it's drawing in people that maybe are involved in other areas as well.
I mean, God knows. I mean, I like to say that the politicians that have come to my assistance have been very well-meaning, but they are on their own. Yeah. They are on their own, and life is difficult for them in doing so.
Yeah.
Whether they will achieve what they're set out to their goal, I don't know. But this is how change comes about, by doing something.
Perhaps we need more of a system where we're just not just having the political parties. We have more independence with our MPs, people who represent. This is what used to be like years ago. People in the locality used to choose one person and they'd send him to Parliament or her to Parliament. And that person wouldn't be dictated to by Big Pharma and the energy companies. I mean, there's so much conflict of interest with these MPs.
Well, in the police, if you've got to declare your associations with people, so there might be a friend who's got a criminal record, that they have to be told about that. So if you're hanging around with people that have been in prison, they're going to look badly on it. that they will dictate where you live, right? If you have a business, they've got to make sure that it's not a conflict to the police. And then you could bring the service into disrepute by your behaviour, you know, on or off duty. And it does happen, and you know, they're quite strict with it. But when you look at MPs, like you mentioned earlier, that are on the sex offenders register, how the hell is that allowed? Why are they not removed?
I know.
You know, and I'll give you an example. There was when people have child abuse images, they used to be graded 1 to 5. It was the scale of R versus Oliver, and 1 is the minor, the 5 is a very, very serious, you know, photo or image. And if you've got a level 5 image, you're going to prison. And I dealt with one case where a man, I think he had 3 or 4, you got 18 months in prison for them alone. Now, I dealt with one case and a fellow had quite a few, and he did initially get a 10-year sentence for possession of level 5 images. And that did get reduced, but on the whole, that was it, he went away. Now, a few years later, I was working with a police officer, a detective, who was involved in covert operations. He would make out he was, for online grooming, he was one of these covert officers that would get in there, make out he's a young boy or a young girl, and then someone would chat them up and arrange to meet them. This officer was... at the time I met him, he was the worshipful master of a local Masonic lodge. He was involved in the running and organising of swingers parties in a very wealthy Jewish suburb of London. He told me about people that would go to these parties, and that it did involve a Crown Court judge. He was caught with 10,000 level 5 videos involving the rape of young children and bestiality involving young children as well, right? He was caught with them. They were his images, and not only did he have them, he was also accused of distributing them. He had served in the military on an intelligence basis level, and at his trial he was commended by the judge for his service in the police and with the intelligence services, and he was given a community service order.
That's all.
And that's what he got, yeah. So this shows this disparity, this injustice, you know.
So how do you see the future, for us to wrap up now, how do you see the future with various police forces, including the Wiltshire one, losing in the next couple of years another 25% of their workforce? How is this going to impact?
Well, I think if you're an organised criminal in this country today, you're laughing. Ain't no one coming looking for you. It ain't happening.
No.
You know, there is just nothing.
No.
I mean, today I heard from a former colleague that he said it's like going back to the 90s. They're now saying to him, get out on the street, because the murder rate in London has got higher than New York.
Yeah.
You know, all stabbings are teenagers. It's the worst it's ever been, because they've stopped the stop and search and everything else. And they've been told, get out there and get hands in pockets. You stop and search everyone. And so it's political intervention, but cutting police numbers, I mean, it's draconian. Even third world countries refuse to do it. I was watching a thing about El Salvador, and they knew the only way to restore justice and have a decent society was to have a properly trained, properly paid and well manned up police force.
Well, we certainly need a reset button over government, police, judiciary.
What they're going to do, and I was told this by a cabinet minister, the police force are going to be amalgamated with the fire service. They're going to regionalise all police forces. The City of London is totally outside of any jurisdiction, because Parliament has no governance over the City of London, so the City of London police can virtually do what they want, right? And that's a fact. London will be left alone, but all the other forces will be amalgamated. And you're seeing that now with police cars. The livery on the cars used to say Hampshire Police or Wiltshire Police, and all that. Now it just says police, police, police. And they're continuing with this agenda. And this was devised many, many years ago, so it's not just going to be implemented, you know.
Well, it's harder and harder now to find a policeman, because you've got many police stations closing down, and the offices are basically in council offices, and so you can't get to a policeman.
It's been done on purpose.
Yeah.
It has been done on purpose, but
It's becoming like a war.
yeah, I mean, it's such a shame, such a shame.
It is.
And the people that will suffer will be the public.
Yeah.
The public will suffer, and the children will suffer, and they are suffering. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the people have the say, and they've got to stand up for their rights. I mean, what more? I've done my bit, and
Yeah. I mean, you've exposed as much as you can.
you know,
and this show today will expose this situation to more and more people.
Yeah.
And let's just hope and pray that, you know, we can turn this around, but it has got to come from the top now.
There'll be a tipping point, I would have thought, at some point. There will be. The victims are all getting together, you know, and they're standing up and they're being heard now. And
well, we've got to
exposing
say
people.
to the government, enough is enough. As you said, the crime rate in London, crimes are ignored. We cannot continue along this path. So just ask everybody to stand together and say, we're not...
Well, the MPs need to do their job as well.
They do.
They need to do their job. They're
Yeah.
paid to do their job. You know, they get a good living wage, and there are good MPs, but others, you know, there is a gravy train there, and they need to do what they're meant to be doing, and they're standing up for the people.
Yeah, that's what they're there for.
Yeah.
Yeah, to stand up for the people. Thank you, Jon, for coming.
Quite all right. No, pleasure.
Okay, yeah, we'll do it again. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the first of our Purple Summer shows highlighting child abuse in this country.